Hey ladies and gents, and Happy New Year to everybody who's watching this video sort of relatively soon after it's released, and happy whenever to everybody else. So, today's rant, we'll start with an apology. I did say I would try and put out a video every week. I have utterly failed. I will still continue to try and probably continue to fail. Unfortunately, life gets in the way, and it's been that time of the year where I have to do a lot of eating food, especially chocolate, and life is hard. And the other thing is, recent news articles have been full of very sad and tragic natural disasters, such as the flooding in the north of England and Wales that has caused so many people to be out of their homes and ruined so many people's festive period, which is a real tragedy. And I know the area I live in was subject to flooding a couple of years back, and I know people who were dislodged, and I understand how this affects people's lives. So my thoughts are with those people who have suffered, but it's not an issue that causes me to want to go on a mad rant. I mean, there's some debate about how the UK should have tackled it, etc., but that's not what I want to talk about today. But my thoughts are with those people suffering. The inspiration for today's video was in fact an interview on the BBC News with British entrepreneur Sir Richard Branson. And for those of you who don't know Sir Richard, he set up a record shop in London in the early 1970s under the name Virgin Records, and went on to create a chain of record shops, and then created a record label, and they had some quite prominent names. Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, I believe, was released under Virgin, and I think the Sex Pistols may have been one of theirs, and then there's a few others that I could probably look up, or you could probably look up. He then went on to set up an Atlantic airline, doing the cross-Atlantic journey between the UK and the US, and that has somewhat expanded since. And he, what else has Virgin done? A record label. I think they do insurance. He's a man with his finger in many, many pies now. There was a radio station at one point that he subsequently sold. And he was a man who didn't have many academic qualifications. He suffered dyslexia when he was at school, and was told he would amount to nothing, and has done a very sound job of proving the world wrong on that regard. And he was doing an interview that addressed some issues such as how active a parent he was, being a top entrepreneur. Did he find the time for it? And it was quite an interesting interview. But one of the last questions he was asked was, would he have been able to succeed in business in the same way had he been a woman? And his answer was very interesting. And he gave a comparison to a lady who rose to prominence around the same time as him, and probably would have been in a similar equivocal position today, had she not sadly passed from this world early. And to me, that felt like he was saying, well, no, it wasn't necessarily the case. But he then went on to say that there aren't enough women in top business, and maybe we should look at doing, and this was in a UK context because it was an interview with a British broadcaster, maybe we should look at introducing laws like they have in Norway that kind of enforce that at the top rungs of business there needs to be a certain number of women. Now, this kind of thing is a very prominent issue in modern day society, the number of women in top roles. And I don't think that's a bad thing for us to be aware of, but I think it can be a bad thing for us to be obsessed with. I can give some more recent examples. So the Labour Party in the UK, which is at the moment, our second biggest political party in this country, though they have been the governing party on a number of occasions. I think Britain's most famous recent Prime Minister is Tony Blair, and he was a Labour Party leader. So, a reasonably large organisation, and last year they had a change of leadership within the party following their failure to win the UK general election. Ed Miliband, who was the leader of the party, stepped down, and there was a democratic election held by members of the party and members of the major unions that support the party, and members of, well, I can't remember the exact term used, but basically people who had donated a small sum to say that they were a supporter of the party, but didn't wish to be a full-time member. All of these people got to vote in the leadership campaign, and a slightly more radically left-wing politician by the name of Jeremy Corbyn became the leader of the party. And there was much talk in the press about the number of women who were given top jobs in his cabinet. And he was also, proudly declaring that a full half of the shadow cabinet were women. There were complaints that not the top most prominent positions went to women, but I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. But the point is, it's an issue that we see in the news relatively often, and to me, it begs an obvious question. Do we want a society? Well, I think most people would agree we want a society that's fair. But which is fairer? A society where you are judged purely on ability, or a society that aims to make sure that there is reasonable representation within everything of genders, races, ideologies, and a proportional representation that looks like the society, how the society is made up. So if your society will say, let me pull up the statistics for the UK. So let's imagine we're creating a government, and there is going to be 100 key positions in that government, because 100 makes it nice and easy. Do we want to live in a society where we go, well, first of all, that means 50 of those positions in this new government should be male, and 50 of those positions in that new government should be female? Then I suppose we should look at sexuality. According to the Office of National Statistics in the UK, and if I'm not feeling lazy, I'll put a link down below. You can find out the data yourself. 1.5% of the population are homosexual, which seems actually less than I would expect and less than a number that's been used on other things. But we'll go with that because this is just an example. I suspect actually it's probably higher than that, but my suspecting, rather than their survey of 180,000 people, probably is the least accurate of the two. So we'll stick with what they say. So at least 1 to 2 people on our cabinet need to be homosexual. 0.4% of people, and this really does strike me as lower than I would have expected it to be, but 0.4% of people identified with being bisexual. So if we say 2 people need to be homosexual or bisexual in order to represent sexualities equally on our cabinet, and then we need to break down race. So if we're looking at the UK, 87% of the population is white Caucasian, so 87 members of our cabinet need to be white. 7% of the UK's population is of Asian origin, so we need to have 7 representatives of Asian origin. 3% of our population is black, so we need to have 3 people who are black. 2% of our population is mixed race, so we need to have 2 people who identify as being of mixed race, and then 1% of the population comes under the ominous category of other. So we'll have someone who claims to be a South American origin or Native American or another group to represent the others. And then we'll have our 100 people, and it'll be representative of all of the different groups within our society. But then we could break that down further, and we could look at religious makeup and etc, etc, etc. Or the alternative is we create a society where we're blind to those things, where we just don't care whether it's a guy or a girl, whether they're black, whether they're white. We just want the people who are most capable, of pure meritocracy. And I think of the two, the second is less false. As long as we're worrying about the number of men, women doing top jobs or bottom jobs, because I'm almost 100% of garbage collection people in the UK, for example, are men. Perhaps more women should be encouraged to do that. What is a seemingly undesirable, though I think reasonably well paid job. Why should one gender be bearing the brunt of that unpleasant job? Why should our armed forces be the people who risk their life on a regular basis? Why aren't more women made to do frontline service? That's a massive discussion, and I'm that a can of worms I don't want to open. But let's pick. We can't just apply this to desirable positions. We need to apply it to undesirable ones. Well, aren't there more? And this is a desirable position in my opinion, but why aren't there more school teachers of young kids who are male? It's like 80%, maybe higher, of all school teachers for children under the age of 11 are female. I think it may even be higher than that. I think I worked out 80% looking at the number of teachers at the school where my son attends, but I have subsequently looked up the official statistics online. In fact, no, let me get these up now so that I'm not just jabbering on to you. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is really very professional, and you haven't you haven't even researched your facts beforehand. And I must say, I have now pulled this up. And this is an article released by the British government in 2012, stating that record numbers of men are teaching in primary schools, but still more are needed. And they state that there were 3,743 male teachers and 15,750 female teachers, meaning 19% of the teaching staff were male, which is not very many. 4-to-1 ratio. Though my 80% estimate and the school my son attends clearly is representative of the average, which is nice. Nice to be right. Happens occasionally. So there's clearly industries that are male dominated, clearly industries that are female dominated. Should this be something we obsess over? Is my question. Or should we just accept that in society certain people are drawn to certain things, and that there will inevitably be industries that are male dominated because they appeal to the male psyche more, and there will be industries that are more female dominated? Now this leads to other questions. For example, pay. There is much online debate over the issue of the gender pay gap. Now, this was something discussed by the British Prime Minister in the run-up to the election. The gender pay gap, and I know the statistics vary depending on what sources quote it and what things they take in and out of account, so I don't actually believe any statistics on the gender pay gap, because I can always analyse what's been said and chuck it out the window. But I think it is clear that in industries that are more female dominated, there are lower pay levels in industries that are more male dominated, and should that be the case? But I don't think this is an equality question. And some of you might be thinking, well, clearly it is, you're quite mad. But no, I don't think it is. I think we have it's a separate issue totally about pay distribution in jobs, and that pay just doesn't represent your contribution to society. I'll take the example of teachers. Teachers are massively essential to society, and they get relatively low pay. The pay scale in the UK for teachers, I'll translate this into dollars because most people understand dollars. It is in the region of $30,000 to $50,000 per year. In the region of, and that's not a very exact amount. It probably caps slightly higher off than that, and 30,000 really is very, very bottom of the scale. But the amount that a sports star gets paid in the UK, someone who plays soccer, for example, I'm going to call it football because that's what it should be called. You kick a ball around with your feet, and if you live in a country where you call a game football, where you throw the ball and handle it with your hands, you really need to think about the name of that sport, because it doesn't make sense. Very entertaining sport, apart from all the commercial breaks. Very entertaining sport, but it's not called football. I know you sometimes kick it forwards, but mostly it's about hands and throwing and piling into people and entertaining organised violence, which is brilliant. Let's have more of that. But that aside, top soccer / football stars in the UK get paid literally millions. Is their contribution to society that much more significant than that of a teacher? And there could be arguments to be said that actually it is, and that not all of them are academic achievers, and it's aspirational, and they encourage people to be fit, and so on and so forth, and that they live their life in the limelight. And there's arguments in the other direction. But I think, even within businesses, the percentage now paid to top executives compared to that paid at the bottom, especially in the United States, to a lesser extent in Europe, and to an even lesser extent in Asia, where top CEOs of the company are paid far less proportionally than they are in the US. But while without a doubt the people steering the business have a massive input to it and massive responsibility, is it genuinely hundreds of times greater than that of the people that manufacture the product or go out and achieve the sales? Or, are the salesmen truly worth 5 times that of the mechanical engineers and things like that? And the issue of pay, I guess, or the point I'm trying to make here, is a separate issue onto itself. And the issue I wanted to discuss, and I'm going to drag myself back onto before I go even more of a tangent, is about quotas and what is gender equality. Now, I'm pro equality, but as I said before, but I'm pro equality of opportunity. I think people should be given the opportunity to prove that they can do a thing, and that should be regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of of any external factor that isn't going to influence what they do. Now, there are some jobs that have physical requirements, and generally they will favour one gender or the other. But again, there's exceptions. There's some very big and strong women, and there's some very slight and petite males, for example. It's not always the case, and I think it should be considered on individual merit. And there's some jobs that, for social reasons, have to be done by a specific gender. Tailors, for example, people who work quite intimate, performing quite intimate measurements on people, especially kind of things like bra fitting, etc. I can't imagine society is quite ready for male bra fitters right now. But the number of the fact that I can only think of one or two examples is a sign that there's not that many jobs that can only really be performed by one gender. And I think, if we're going to have a true society of equality, of opportunity, which is what I think we should have, where everybody gives a chance, and you're not hindered by a gender bias when you try to grab that opportunity. If we could achieve that society, it would be a brilliant thing. But I think we'd also find that if we achieve that society, we won't have equality of outcome. And the reason being is that there is genuinely a difference between men and women. A physical difference and a psychological difference. We have evolved along different lines to perform different roles in society, and as a result we have different strengths and weaknesses and lean towards different things on average. And there are exceptions to this rule, but I think if you had a society with total equality of opportunity, and I think we're not a million miles from that now. I mean, there's still some old prejudice hanging around that influence things, and I think there probably always will be in one way or the other. I've known women who abjectly refuse to employ women because they don't like dealing with the political situation of having another woman in their team. And I've known women who will only employ women for certain roles because they see them as feminine, which I objected to at the time and object to now. So, and it happens both ways, and it's not just the stereotypical male chauvinist who refuses to see a girl on his executive board or whatever. I think that those people are a dying breed, and that with each generation that's raised on more modern liberal ideals and more modern ways of thinking, and is aware of the statistics about the successes of businesses where you have better gender equality, etc., will have less of those stupid views, and we'll get closer to that ideal that is equality of opportunity. And that's brilliant, and that's what society should be, where everybody is given an equal crack, and then the person who is best capable of doing the thing, regardless of any kind of arbitrary external things such as gender, where they are arbitrary external things, gets given the position, and that's perfect. But we must be prepared that in that society where we have two genders that are different, and they are different, and they're not just different because of social influences, they're different because of evolutionary influences, things that are hardwired into us that make us different. And there's plenty of information about that if you choose to not believe it. If you, I've read people who claim that women and men are equally strong and equally physically capable, but then why is it that we separate sports in the Olympics to be male and female because there's different performance levels at different sports, and it's a massive long-term study that's been going on for ages that demonstrates that fact. That I think actually the Olympics is a fine example of the difference between the genders, and it doesn't make one worse or better. It just means we have different strengths and different weaknesses, and obviously different careers and different things appeal to those strengths and weaknesses. And if we have equality of opportunity and we give everybody a crack at doing the thing they want to do, I think we'll find that actually we don't necessarily get that 50-50 balance in everything. And that's not the end of the world. We're a communal species, and if we all work together as a community, we will achieve great things. And I guess that's probably it for my rant today. I'll try and do some more stuff. I wasn't going to tackle this kind of issue early on, but I'll try and do some more stuff looking at the feminist movement, the men's rights activists, and those bits and pieces, because I do have some thoughts on all of those issues, and things have happened in my life that have had an impact because of the thinking of both those groups, and sometimes a positive impact and sometimes a negative impact. But I thought I'd lay down the line with what I think would be a fair world to live in. And it's not just about gender. I'm also talking about race here, because the same thing applies to all of it. Should people really be employed because an arbitrary measure is in place because you've got to have a representative of each race? And do we want every company looking like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise in its more recent, well, in fact, the Starship Voyager? If you've watched that series, a very, very carefully picked crew to represent absolutely everybody, with the strong female and the prominent alien and the mix of ethnic representatives, and just really, really, it's just so false. Let's have a world where everyone gives a crack and no one cares whether the whole board to this top company are all women or all men. No one cares, because it's a non-issue, because we're gender blind. And if we can have a society where we're gender and race blind, where there's something you don't need to be afraid to talk about, then that would be perfect. And I'm going to end my rant on that, and I hope to see you guys for the next video.